Good evening, good evening, good evening. I am so absolutely excited to share this moment in time tonight with someone who actually is a part of my life because she keeps my dude dead.
That's right. That's right.
Keeps my dude in a respectable space. So,
Oh,
so we have the uh, Miss Tamasa, the master loctician, who is spending some time with us tonight, and we're so very excited. On behalf of the encouragement campaign, I just want to thank you for carving out some time in your schedule just to spend a few minutes with us. Thank you so much. Peace and blessings. Appreciate that.
yes, of course. And thank you. And the honor is all mine. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Listen. I appreciate that. One of the things which is really so crazy, as we have journeyed through this whole COVID thing, is that in
Mhm.
last year at this time, we were under a veil, if that makes sense, right?
Right.
We didn't know what to
Mhm.
do. We didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to eat. We didn't know where to get
That's,
food. We didn't
mhm.
know where toilet paper was coming from.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
and the thing
That's
is,
right.
the thing which is really powerful to me is that we didn't really know a lot of people in our immediate 6 degrees who have been impacted, right? Because
Right. Right.
nobody was calling nobody. Everybody was just trying to stay in their house.
Right.
They were trying to just make sure that the people in their house was cool.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So here we are
Hmm.
with
That's right. That's
you
right.
know what I'm saying. So here we are with the celebration of 1 year later, a
Right.
year and some weeks, quite frankly. And
Hmm.
by the grace of God, we're still here. So that's a wonderful start.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Hey.
Yes, I agree.
What I got to
Yes.
tell you, what I got to tell you is that when I spoke to you, wow, must have been a month ago or so, when I was trying to see what I could do to get in to see you, so you could help me to be in a more of a crisp situation hair wise, you know.
That's
Uh,
right.
and I'm
And
talking to you. What happened? I did hear you say that again.
no, yeah, it's fine all the time. No, I didn't say anything, but the hair
Listen,
is
listen,
fine all the
Martha.
time. But I get you.
Tamasa, listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm typically not anxious in these situations, but I said to myself, I said, now listen, Tamasa usually she knows me typically after she got my joint all.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
coming to the table today, I was in the mirror, I'm like, oh my God.
Nope, nope. Don't even feel that way when I'm not actually working. I actually try to make it a point to turn my hairstylist lens off.
Okay.
Not because I really like it's a thing for me, but I don't really want people to ever feel any kind of way. And I actually do such a good job that I tend to turn it off for myself too. And then
Fair
I
enough.
think, oh my gosh, they're gonna realize I actually do hair and I'm not representing. So it goes both ways.
But that means
Yeah.
that we're in good space because I was saying to myself, as I was in prep for what we were doing, and I'm gonna say this, and I know it ain't true. I was gonna say as I was doing hair and makeup, as I was doing
I hear that.
as I was, as I was doing hair and makeup, I said, Tomasa gonna look at my head and be like, "Yo, Dad, what's good?"
No, no, it is fine. As long as you don't look at mine and say what's up.
Nah. We
So
good.
no, it's all good.
But I was so excited
Yeah.
to for this moment in time and to realize we're gonna have time to do this. Like I
Mhm.
began to say a couple weeks ago when I called you and we were trying to see what we could do scheduling wise and you began kind of talking a little bit and you said, yeah, well, I was impacted by the virus. I got to be
Right.
honest with you. I got to be honest with you.
Right. Right.
Every time I hear that, and what's happening is getting closer and closer to home, right? In that first year,
Right.
with the
Right.
folks that we knew per se, right? Or we didn't know because we weren't communicating. But
Right.
now here we are in a situation where it's closer and closer to home. I
Right.
remember, I
Right.
remember after 1 year. Well, let me not lie. I remember after it had to be 8 months. that I reached out to you, and you and I talked about it. And I was like, well, listen, I need to come through. And if you remember that day when I came through, I had my bag. I had 4 face masks in the bag. I had some sanitizer.
Right.
I had some ammonia. And I came.
Yes. No.
I came in your spot like
with the whole shebang, just ready to roll, ready to disinfect everything. That's right. No,
and
that's real.
You know, and you said
that's real.
You said no problem. I got my own mask. I got this.
That's right.
I got that. So
no, I get it. Yeah.
He goes, but so when you told me a couple weeks ago that you had the challenge, I got to be honest with you. It kind of jostled me. I think that's the appropriate way to communicate. Right? It jostled me because I was like, wow. Well, not often does my daughter act up, and this is probably the first COVID survivor story that we've done that my dog couldn't act appropriate. So for those in the world, that's Cairo.
That's all right.
That's Cairo. Wasn't
hey,
me.
Cairo.
Hey, Cairo. Another story we talk offline.
That's right.
But it jostled me is the point. And that's just because when you develop relationships with people, you don't want anything bad or anything negative for anybody who's in your field of experience, if that makes sense.
Right.
So the moment that we talked, I was like, wow. And then you began to tell your story. And I said, you know what? If you would humor the encouragement campaign and share your story, it'd be awesome. Now, I tell everybody, the reason that we do these is because it's a mutual benefit, right? The benefit in theory is supposed to be to give people who have not been impacted a purview into what it really is. You know, what is it? You know, we all saw the media. We all heard this one, and we got things second, third, fourth party as to what the situation really was. But it's really so precious, if you will, to be able to have a real live person, you know, down to earth, talking about what it really, really is, and it blesses community. So I thank you once again for taking the time to even consider spending some time with us. What I found also is that the survivors, when they're sharing their stories, it's an opportunity to expiate that anxiety that was taking place during that moment. Right now, granted, I don't know if the moment a year ago versus a month ago is any different, but I think that the moment that you hear A, B, C, and D,
right,
you're concerned. And so I'm going to shut up. I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to say, Tamasa, the floor is yours. Tell me about the origins. Tell me about the experience. Tell me how you cope. Tell me how you remedied. Tell me. And I'm gonna close my mouth. You know that's hard for me to do.
Well, so interestingly, it was not for me a very frightening experience.
Okay.
The concern actually came more so after learning that I'd contracted COVID and how it could have been a lot worse. So I'm one of the individuals that I would say did not get very ill. I might be classified as someone who was asymptomatic, but in hindsight, I do realize that I had symptoms, but they were so mild that I seem to explain them away as being something else other than COVID, which can almost sound silly because you would think in a day of COVID, if you have any symptoms, that would be the first thing that comes to mind. So in my particular case, what was a little hard for me is because I had actually, tried to be just very mindful and careful with how I was just navigating life in the day of COVID. Right. And in many ways, I think I'd done really, really well. Right. And in my particular case, I happened to, I feel that I would have been my most vulnerable in my work environment. And as a hairstylist, anyone would imagine that I would come across multiple people in a day, and then over a week, that's, multiple people, and it's in relatively close quarters. So it would be just as, it would be a concern for a client as well as it would be for myself, like the idea of how, if the environment is prepared and in a safe environment to work in. So I really thought that was where my greatest vulnerability was. And actually, I do think that was where it was. Mm-hmm. But what I've learned through the process was it's a lot easier to drop the ball, if you will, than you would imagine, because it felt like I was very prepared in very obvious ways. So in my particular case, my husband had gone out of the country to visit his family. He's from DR, and he had not seen them for quite a while because of the pandemic, and decided, after about a year, to go visit his mom, who's aging. And generally speaking, I trusted his judgment as to how he would care for himself. But anyway, he had gone to DR, and it was a week trip, and he was coming back on a Sunday. And because I was out of town, I happened to come in very, very late Tuesday going into Wednesday. So he had been home about 2 days or so before I had come in. Mm-hmm. And I kind of knew that there was already potential for awkwardness. And that's because he tends to generally speaking, be affectionate, or at the very least, when we would first see each other, he would like to embrace and kind of hug. And especially since we hadn't seen each other, for a little time. And I knew that I was already uncomfortable with the thought of that before even seeing him. So I didn't really know how that would play out. So it was already like a little stressful in my head with how to approach it. So I'd come in, and he was already in the bed, and I left my mask on because I was outside. So I tried to approach it as if I just kind of forgot to take off my mask. And yes. So I'm walking around, which I don't typically walk around if it's just he and myself with the mask. And I also tend in the past couple of weeks to start wearing a double mask. So he kind of was giving me the eye, and he could see that I had not like embraced him and just kind of welcomed him back in that way. And I sat across from him, actually socially distancing, and I, talked to him and tried to sound warm so it wouldn't feel so uncomfortable for him. And I can still see that he was really unhappy with me. And I found myself really just saying, I know I'm really sorry, but just wait until we know that everything is safe. And interestingly, it had never occurred to me the idea of actually testing. So at the time, I'm just thinking, give it a couple of days to see if you have any obvious side effects. Right. Excuse me, obvious symptoms. Right. And so anyway, the first night, which was not, it was a little uncomfortable too. I chose to sleep in a separate room for this very reason. So that added to what was now the tension of, hey, what's going on with that? Right. So, right. And I hadn't given it much thought before, but I realized that when you are, with someone who you share your life in your bed, just in like literally to sleep in, right. That if one has COVID, it really does bring up some spoken or perhaps some unspoken questions of what do you do? And that's because, if you're used to sharing the space, then that is what is normal for you. But if you think that one of the two people may have it, like, do you offer comfort and to not make someone feel uncomfortable, or do you really do what we're told to do in terms of socially distance and that kind of thing? Wow. And that kind of started the some other tension. So anyway, I slept in the other room, and that was just the beginning of what would be 2 days worth of tension, because again, during the day I would wear the mask and, you know, I would work and that kind of thing. And he was not. I must admit that I did not, because of the level of, and it wasn't overt tension. It was just, I knew that he really was not happy and felt like I was exaggerating, like how we had to go about this. So just to clarify, it wasn't that he was saying anything, but I could just feel that it felt like I was being kind of, you know, over the top to him. And I didn't necessarily feel that way. But anyway, so this is now a Wednesday and Thursday. And by chance, thank goodness to his employer, for one, which he was not expecting, is when he came back in the country, he was expecting to be able to work the following day. And his employer told him that he had to take the week off. And when he was to come in, which would be from that point, that he had to have a negative test in hand to be able to start work. So I didn't realize that that was the expectation at the time. I just knew that he was home spending the week, letting him go by. And Thursday, he happened to go out in the afternoon. I didn't think anything of it. And by the time I finished work Thursday, I was, you know, kind of eating without my mask at that time. And he had come in with what seemed like the biggest mask I'd ever seen in my life. And just to speak on the tension at the time, I interpreted the mask to be, oh, if you're going to wear a mask, I'm going to wear a mask. And I thought it was like something on really a silly level like that. But he had his mask on, which was really the first time he had a mask on in the 2 days that we had been around each other. And, you know, he came in and he kind of peeked over where I was, and he said, hey, to me. And I said, hey. And because I was trying to socially distance, I could hear he had gone into the kitchen, and I waited till he left, and I went into the kitchen to do what I wanted to do. And he kind of came back, and he was by the front door. And he happened to say, while I'm standing at the stove, I have COVID. And I remember just kind of rolling my eyes to myself thinking, here we go. This is just not funny. Right. And I didn't say anything. And I was like really annoyed, because it's the silliest thing, because why would anyone play with that? But I just thought, he's really taking this too far. Like, you know, I just thought this was whatever was going on between us. And then he goes, you know, to the back in the room. And after probably just a minute or so, I had gone to the back, and I said, you have COVID? And just long story short, he said yes. And I asked him one more time. And I think it's because I was truly in disbelief, because I thought that this was just, you know, some silly tension between the two of us, but that he had gone earlier in the day when he did leave, and he had gotten the test that he would have needed to have for his employer. And that was when he learned he had COVID.
Wow.
And needless to say, it was really shocking. And I'm only imagining that for anybody who hears that they have it, I don't know about anybody, but I would think a good portion of folks is usually shocking when you get it, which is almost crazy when you think of how many people have gotten it. But it is just a feeling of like, whoa. And yes, and I'm really putting it mildly, but the feeling really is like, that. Wow. Yes. But anyway, so because this was the evening time, I can usually have like another residence to go to, like over the weekend. So from there, I realized that, okay, I'm going to have to cancel any future appointments, immediate future appointments, and quarantine myself, because at the very least at that time, I felt that I'd been exposed. I didn't necessarily think that I had it. So anyway, the following day, I kind of prepped some things in the house, because, you know, I really kind of encouraged him to try not to go out to the store or anything like that. But I would, you know, make some food for him and get some things from the store that he might need so that he did not have to go out. And I chose to do my quarantining outside of our apartment. And that to say, when I'd gone to the other residents, that as you can imagine, my daughter who lives there was not happy. And
right.
Yes, and to be quite frank, what she said, which makes 110% sense, is she said, so you've been exposed to Juan and you're gonna quarantine and come over here? And, you know, which really just sounds like, why wouldn't you stay there? But at the time, I was thinking that because I had been wearing a mask and for the most part staying socially distant, and he showed no symptoms, that I was likely good. And I'm only stressing that point because you really can end up with a different appreciation for how easy this thing is transmitted, because there was no particular coughing going on. There were just no signs, and some, even though we hear this, it still feels like if someone is coughing or any kind of symptoms that sound kind of related to like cold kind of symptoms, that would be something that you might kind of look out for, or would imagine that you'd be around if you were exposed. But you, as much as you hear about the idea of one being asymptomatic, I think it's really hard to imagine at times that that is a real thing. And that's one of the things that I would really like to stress to folks, is that it is really real. So again, he was someone who, my husband, who has asthma. So I had always felt particularly afraid for him to come across COVID, because in a family, we just always thought, even though he really is a healthy person, that if he had come across COVID, he very well could be one who seemed like healthy as a horse and then in the hospital. So we were just so careful about, well, we were careful anyway, but we were just really hopeful that he didn't come across it in particular, more so than even the rest of us. So that to say, when he, who has asthma, was asymptomatic, that was truly just never a consideration in my mind, that someone who had a respiratory issue could not express COVID in a way where you can tell that there's some kind of respiratory distress. So anyway, so he had it. And one of the other things that I did learn, which again, you hear these things, but I just like to stress it, is the following day, which would have been a Friday, I did get tested and then did my quarantining. What I didn't realize was it really is absolutely true that that you should quarantine and then wait a couple of days before testing. And that's because I waited my few days to get my results, and my results came back negative. So within that time, I really did quarantine fully, because I was not feeling the obvious symptoms. Once I got my negative results, it really really confirmed what I was thinking, which was, I don't really think I have it, because I don't feel like I had no runny nose, no obvious anything. Like pretty much the way I'm talking now was how I felt and looked during those quarantine days. So anyway, the one thing I must say that I did experience is I had what felt like the beginning of a cold, which I don't typically get myself, but sometimes when one gets a cold, how you can get a beginning of a sore throat. And when I would swallow, I would feel it like slightly in my ear. And that was something that I could feel that I don't typically feel. But particularly because I had gotten the negative result, I just convinced myself that it was the stress of waiting for the answer of COVID, and what was I going to do with work, and what would people think if I now had COVID? It was like all of that stress. So once I got the negative results, I was convinced that it wasn't COVID. I was just stressing myself so much that I was making myself sick. So I didn't really think much of it. But anyway, so the other funny thing that I will say that crossed my mind was I remember saying, wow, how could I get a cold through all of this protection from COVID? And that was the one thing that really did seem odd. Like, if you have masks, you wash your hands like crazy, how could you ever even get a cold? Because those are the ways you would pick up a cold. And one would think, had I really thought about that, I would say, well, maybe something is up. But like a few times I thought, that is so strange how you can pick up a cold and not like have COVID. But anyway, so anyway, I waited about a week or so, and my husband called to say that he had now tested negative 2 times and that I can now come home. So I told him, okay, I'll come home in a day or two, and I would start to prep for work and that kind of thing. And I came home. He seemed to be fine. He just, through talking with him over the phone, he did seem relatively asymptomatic, not in distress in any kind of way. So that was good that he felt that way. But I could really see again that had it not been for his employer insisting that he had the test, that he would have been exposing people and he would not have known, and the people would not have been suspecting of it either. So the thought of that was like kind of scary. But anyway, I'd come home and kind of cleaned the place, and I was preparing and getting ready for eventually working the next day. So the next day comes, and I'm now preparing for work. And for some odd reason, as a hairstylist, as I'm preparing, there's some oils that I have. And I remembered saying, oh, I wonder which one is in this bottle, because I don't have them actually labeled. And I picked up one of the bottles to see if it was one oil versus the other. And I noticed that I could not smell. Oh. And that was when it was like, oh my gosh, I cannot smell.
Hold on, exactly. Let me stop you. First of all, I know your oils because whenever you do my hair, I'm like, I'm taking a bottle of oil with me. And they're very fragrant. Oh. So for you to say you couldn't smell that bad boy.
I could not smell anything. And I would like to stress to folks, the thing that was so interesting about the not smelling, which is why I would never have guessed it, is I associate not smelling something to somehow having a stuffy nose. Mm-hmm. But when you don't have like any nasal congestion, it never occurs to you that you can't smell. And that's because if you walk in a room and you don't smell something, the thought is just that the air is fresh and clean. Right. So unless you know you're cooking fish and should be smelling fish, or you're cooking or just whatever it is, but that you know you should be smelling something and you're not smelling, it does not occur to you, again, if you don't have a stuffy nose, that you should be smelling something. So that was the thing that was kind of interesting. So anyway, long story short, I did, canceled the appointments for the day, took the test, and it turns out that I was positive. But by that point, I had really already had COVID for about a week and a half. It was just unbeknownst to me because I had not had the symptoms. Right. With it. But so from there, I just didn't do much. I just kind of knew, just stay put now and, do your time. And that's pretty much it with that. But what I will say is I have such respect for the way that, I don't know if it's New York City or New York State, but the way that New York has gone about their trace, what do they call it? Trace contact and tracing, something, yeah. I can't think. Yeah, contact tracing? Yeah. Yes, contact tracing. These folks are so on it. Like just with my limited experience, I really get the sense that they really are trying to stop this thing. So there was some things I had heard of before, but it's different when you're actually part of the contact tracing. And they really do, if you need to provide a place for you to quarantine. So if you needed to, you can go to a hotel. That sounds great at first, but then I was like, wow, like, you know, I'm sure they will not let you out of the hotel, like if you felt the need. So I was like, maybe I'll just stay home, but they will provide a hotel. I didn't take advantage of it at the time, but they provide all of your meals. And I happened to speak to someone later who told me that she actually took advantage of the meals, and she said they were absolutely delicious, and it was any kind of cuisine you can imagine. Nice. But just point being that they provide food for you. They, if you felt you needed someone to talk to, they just had so many resources that you really got the sense that New York is taking this seriously and is trying to accommodate as much as possible so that people do not find themselves having to go out, and expose people. So that was, again, just something that I was pleasantly surprised and have a lot of respect for. And I imagine at some point they're going to have to pay that bill, because I could really see that. Yes. Yes. But
you said, and I'm sorry, I just got to jump in because I
sure, please.
There are so many powerful things that you have said. Number one, I know your husband, got a huge amount of respect for him, love him. You know, he's the type of bruv who inspires me every time I have the opportunity to see him. You know, so to even know that he was impacted, hurts my head. It hurts my head, but you know what's so powerful about what you said, and as you were talking, what was resonant for me is I was like, wow. One of the biggest fears for me personally, and I'll be vulnerable for a minute, is the fact that in the early days, before testing was prevalent and things were going on, we were all thinking that we were asymptomatical, right? Well, if you anything like me, meaning if my elbow hurt, my arm hurt, my neck hurt, my ears hurt, I gotta be right.
Right.
But you are the absolute first person that I'm speaking to who was asymptomatic, and that asymptomatic piece is vast, right? Because that's an experience all its own, because you don't know. You know, you feeling good, moving around, and it goes back to what you were saying about your husband. He doing what he's doing. He feel good. He feel great. You know, but that asymptomatic piece was the shadow that for myself was on my back, and I was like, I know some of the places I've been. I know some of the things that I've experienced, and so on and so forth. Doing it the preliminary stages of this. And you just kind of say, well, you know, many people have said, I'm sure I was asymptomatic. I'm sure I was. Long before testing and all of that stuff came to the table, I'm sure I was asymptomatic. And so to hear you mention that, you know, the other thing that you said, which was really powerful, is that couples in COVID.
Right.
And let's let that wash over for a minute. Couples in COVID, because it's my loved one, right? This is the person that, you know, I said, I do.
Right.
But once COVID comes to the table, baby, I love you and everything, but you know, it's something that you're thinking about, because you're like, yeah, you see, I can't even articulate it, but couples in COVID, you know, you mentioned how your reactions were what it was, but what I heard is that it kind of offset my regular, what they call modus operandi.
Yes.
You know, and the thing is, that's crazy. It's delicate. How do you respond? How do you?
Yeah, so the interesting thing to me, which is why I brought it up kind of in the way that I did, was what I imagine is, if you're the one if you're the person who thinks initially first has it,
Right.
if that person seems to take the position of, I might be exposed, let me pull back and everyone else stay away from me, it's easier for your partner and the rest of the family to stay away. However, if your position is either you don't really feel you have it, even though you've been exposed, or if because you don't feel well, you like to have your family members kind of care for you through the sickness, then it really adds an interesting nuance to it, because I would imagine it puts your partner in the position of, if my partner is not feeling well, really normally the right thing to do is to care for that person. But how do you approach that when, if the person who you're caring for, you can become sick yourself? So in my particular case, it happened to be that my husband did not, he genuinely did not feel he was affected until he learned he was affected. And again, that's where the pressure came, because I felt like I didn't know, and I felt like it was reasonable for me to take a wait and see kind of position. And just to kind of stress it a little bit, the reason why he would have not thought so is because prior to flying back to the States, he had taken a test, and his test came back negative. Now, what happened ultimately was that he was exposed and contracted it after the actual test, which is what you use to then fly. So I think in many cases, someone might not get COVID within such a small window, but because it was such a small window, in fairness, he really did think that he was good to go. But a position like my own, when I haven't flown at all, I still felt like, well, let's just wait and see. But that to say, I think that can be a challenge with partners in life, because it can be a sticky situation, and it felt to me, which I think it ultimately is, because it's a pandemic, is that it puts you in a position of you don't want to risk someone's life, because in my case and my husband's case, we happen to be asymptomatic, and I'm grateful in many ways for that. But you really just don't know how your body will respond. And you would never want to, be ill yourself, or to have COVID, even if you don't feel like you have symptoms, and you don't want to ill affect your partner. Like, what if your partner like literally didn't make it, or even if they did make it, but they just had a really bad case of COVID? So it really is kind of an interesting thing, and I had not given it much thought beforehand what that would be like, but I would imagine that has a lot to do with why, when a person, whether it's a man or woman, comes across COVID, that very often their partners end up with it as well, because it really becomes awkward, and sometimes people don't know what to do. So anyway, that's
I think that it's very, very delicate. You know what I'm saying? Because what it does is it puts you in a certain mindset situation where it's wow, it's wow. It's too delicate. It's like, once we develop our relationships, relationships are what they are. You know what I mean? And then now we have this unknown thing, which is crazy, which none of us ain't never seen it before, right? And now you got the situation, and everybody goes into a mode. I don't care who you are. You love incredibly your people, but you still in the back of your head, you kind of got a me find me situation, because you want to make sure that I'm strong, so that this way I can make sure I can keep everybody else strong, if that makes sense. And again, I mean, that's just what resonates for me. I think that it's a hard space. particularly when you say asymptomatical. I've talked about before with various folks how when we talked about the COVID piece initially, there were certain signs and symbols, right, that
Right.
you'd be looking for. I'm looking for a cough. I'm looking for heavy chest deal. I'm looking for body aches. I'm looking for this. But when you don't have that,
Right. Right.
you don't have that. You're just moving about. And if you're one of those people who, since you don't have that, you're not even testing.
Right.
That's of a bird of a different color completely, because
Right.
you don't even know what you didn't know. I think the
Right.
other element that you mentioned is our natural tendency. God forbid my wife is ill. My natural tendency is to try and cradle her and say, "Baby, what's good?
Right.
Talk to me. Can I get you Tylenol? Can I get you a shot of bourbon? I mean, what
Right. 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 Right.
whatever it
Right.
is, that's your natural tendency. But what
Mhm.
happens when it's asymptomatic and you don't know? He don't,
Right.
whatever relation, that's such a delicate space.
Yeah.
I'm so excited, to know that both of you have pulled through. Like
Yeah.
I said before,
Yeah.
Juan has always treated me, he's always treated me stellar. I come in, he be like,
Right.
"You want to eat? You good? You like it?"
Right. Right.
There's Cairo again, ladies and
Hey,
gentlemen.
Cairo.
Yeah, hi Cairo. We introduced Cairo previously. It means somebody's on my step. But anyway, Cairo, you
Right.
made your debut. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed.
No. No, don't even be.
All right, but
Cairo's family.
yeah, Cairo's family, but Cairo gonna get in a little while. That's another story. But what I will say is that I think that you've brought a different element to the table. Because there's a lot of people who have walked around who were asymptomatic.
I have a new appreciation for that myself. I really do. So let me see. What are some of my takeaways about that? So for one, it's led me to believe just how easily and how quickly it really does go from person to person. Of course, excuse me, you organize it in a more obvious way, and then it's a matter of if people are being responsible and that kind of thing. But like, what happens when, like, for one, if you're asymptomatic, you really don't know. So you're making your regular rounds. And again, people are looking for some, like every now and then I'm out in a store and I hear someone cough and I'm kind of like, let me step back or something like that. But if you, right, if you don't, if you don't see or hear something that makes you think that, you have a false sense of security that who you're passing by or who you're interacting with on what seems like a minimal level is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm imagining, just thinking of how Juan first got it, that he likely was not around someone who was just coughing like crazy. It's someone else may have very well, excuse me, have been asymptomatic, or just earlier on and wasn't, very ill. But yeah, just have a true appreciation of potentially how dangerous it is, because just because you start off asymptomatic, it doesn't mean the next person who could pick it up from someone who didn't have symptoms would be asymptomatic themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so it just, you get a different sense of how potentially dangerous it is, and why, in my opinion, it really is best to listen to what the authorities are saying on this, in terms of, washing hands, stay socially distant, like, and also the thing that I would like to encourage is, I was talking to a girlfriend yesterday, and she was saying that she really does feel bad to not communicate with her friends, excuse me, to socialize with her friends, and that some of her friends and family feel that she is being over the top with her willingness to kind of pull herself out of the social scene. And and in that regard, we were kind of the same with how we kind of pulled ourselves out of our social circles. But listening to the idea that I had it, she was just saying, these folks, they get mad. They tell me, oh, you really take it too hard, like wanting to. And the message that I would have to folks is, if you can, especially if it is important to you, to do all of, all the careful, mindful steps, to hang in there and really do them. Because for what it's worth, you may have done it and it might have kept you safe up till now, but you don't want to have done all the right things just to get it on the back end. And again, because you're not guaranteed to have an asymptomatic experience, you don't want to have done all the important things that we needed to do at the beginning and then drop the ball and then possibly become ill later. So I would really encourage folks that, even though I myself am saying that I was asymptomatic, that you're doing the right thing. Don't feel too discouraged. This really is tough on everybody. Like, everybody probably does have COVID fatigue, because you just get so tired of being careful. But just, continue the good fight is basically what I would say. And God willing, we'll come out on the other end, and we'll be able to, do whatever it is people do, whether you're hanging and hugging and rejoicing and all of that good stuff. But eventually, all will be well. It's just that, our patience, I'm sure, is being tested, and, hang in there. Yeah.
Whenever, and I'm so excited every time, and I'm excited about having a chance to share this space and time with you. I think that every time I speak with somebody, there's always a tagline that comes out of the presentation that they give. All right. And what I'd like to do, with your blessing, is I'd like to see Tamasa, don't drop the ball. Right?
So, yes.
Don't drop the ball.
Because don't drop the ball. Yeah.
Don't drop the ball, because as you so eloquently stated, we've managed to get to this period in time, right? And meaning we've done a few things right, and quite frankly, grace of God, we just didn't get it right. But I think the important thing is, because of our fatigue, let's not drop the ball.
Right.
Right. Just because we have a vaccine now, that doesn't mean that it's a cure-all. Right. Don't drop the ball.
Right.
Just because we've been fortunate enough not to be caught up in some of the horrific stories, because there's some horrific stories out there.
Exactly.
There's some horrific stories out there.
Right.
Where people didn't make it through. And now we see people flourishing and making it through and having stories of victory, but don't drop the ball.
That's right.
To drop the ball now is premature, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Don't drop the ball. So whatever they say, success is a process of duplication. So if this has kept you successful for over a year, what do they tell you? They say, if you want to develop a new habit, do it for 30 days. Well, you've been doing some stuff for a year. Don't drop the ball.
Yeah.
Right.
Do not drop the ball. Do not drop. And don't take things for granted. So, for example, I would say, even though I've now had it, I actually still feel the same about COVID. Like, I still feel I have to be just as careful, because even though whichever COVID I have, because there are variants, I have not had those variants. So that would mean it is just as important for me to be as mindful as how I navigate this as before I had it. It was just like one COVID that you'd get, then, you can almost convince yourself maybe why you can kind of relax a little bit. Right. But that's to say, I would encourage folks to, in another way, just to, again, don't drop the ball, and continue the good fight, and it will absolutely be worth it. And also of getting it before I even got it was, who knows what the long-term effects are. So my thought was, like, my daughter happened to have it in October or so, and she had that foggy brain thing. And my thought was, because I tend to be so busy myself, I felt like, of all the things that can go wrong with COVID, like, what would happen if I could not multitask and really kind of hold different ideas at the same time, which I think many of us do because we're juggling so much.
Right.
But that to say, it's not even just you get sick and you get over it. You don't know how to affect you at the time, and you don't know if or how long-term COVID could affect you either. So that to say, even more so a reason to, again, not drop the ball, fight the good fight, hang in there. It is absolutely worth it. This is longer than any of us have expected, but this too shall pass. This too shall pass.
You know what I want to say right now? Right now, what I feel like is, I'm feeling like we should have a little conversation on the side, because, you know, when Tony Robbins got started doing inspirational, messages,
Okay, well, you're doing all the inspiration. I'm following your lead, so yeah, I'm with you.
We can do it. Listen, my thing is this. I think there's been so many powerful things that we've said, and I do my due diligence to not let the calls go beyond an hour, just because with folks like yourself, we could talk for 2 hours. Listen,
Sure.
when we're working, when you're helping me out with the do, I mean, that's 3 hours for sure. So we know we could talk for 3-4 hours for sure.
Right.
But what I think the power is a couple things, and I'm gonna let you go. Number one, beware of the asymptomatical situation.
It's real.
It's real.
Yep.
It's real. Number one. Number two, don't drop the ball. So the things that you've done, get your hair. We understand that we got a vaccination, but let's not misunderstand the vaccination. The vaccination is not indicative of the fact that you will not catch it.
Right.
Again.
Right.
Is just indicative of the fact that you probably won't die.
Right. Right.
I don't know if people are pronouncing that, but I got to pronounce that.
Yes. No. That's an important piece, because one of the things that I learned, and I'm assuming someone else might fall in this category, is I thought vaccines meant if you took it, you then would not get whatever it is you're being vaccinated against.
Right.
But just to clarify for folks, what it would mean is that the chances of, if you were to get it, it just would likely not be as severe. It does not mean you therefore don't have to wear a mask. You don't have to be as careful. It just means that in the unfortunate situation that you get it, that you will survive it. Mm-hmm. But do yourself a favor and do your due diligence so that you don't get it at all. Mm-hmm. And again, this too shall pass.
Tamasa, listen, I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you. You've warmed my heart, and my takeaway is this: don't. Oh, let me bellow it. Don't. Drop. The ball.
Yeah. The ball. Yeah. So listen. I'm gonna say, only because I hate to embarrassingly say that the phone is getting ready to lose its battery and die. So before it does that, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for providing a platform just to express my experience, and and hopefully folks can just hear my story and perhaps feel encouraged to continue doing what they're doing. And it's been wonderful.
Listen, your story is a blessing. I always end the same way. I'm gonna let you go. It don't got to be a long time to be a good time, but the nuggets and the pearls that you've dropped, even if nobody remember nothing else other than don't drop the ball, we good.
That's right.
Peace and blessings.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.